What would you do if saving a stranger's life meant gambling with your own? Not in some far-off theoretical sense, but here, in the frozen breath of the Alaskan frontier, when the decision had to be made between one heartbeat and the next. Would you walk away, let fate take its course, and keep the fragile life you've built safe? Or would you step into the line of fire, knowing full well you might not step back out? Winter of 1910, along the Yukon border, where the law came late, if at all, and justice was often measured by who was left standing. Out here, the snow could bury a man in minutes, the wind could strip the breath from your lungs, and a rifle barrel was as likely to greet you at sundown as a friendly voice. In a valley hemmed by black spruce and ice-fed rivers stood a solitary outpost, Carter's Rest. Nothing more than a timber house with a small store tacked on the front, a smokehouse out back, and a weathered sign above the door. But for the half-frozen or the hungry, it had been the last warm light before the dark. Lena Carter built it that way, simple, sturdy, and out of the way. She came here 7 years ago, a young woman with a broken past and no taste for towns or their talk. Since then, she's learned the language of the land, how to read the snow for signs of weather, how to smell the difference between a storm and a squall, how to keep her rifle oiled and her firewood stacked high. She'd also learned something else. Peace, once found, was worth guarding. Which is why, on that late January afternoon, when the wind had a knife's edge and the clouds stacked like dark fists over the ridge, the sound didn't belong. Not the groan of timber or the cry of a raven, a human sound. Ragged, low, desperate. Lena froze, one gloved hand on the axe buried in the chopping block. The sound came again. In this country, that could mean only one thing. Someone was dying. She could have turned back inside, closed the door, poured herself coffee, and let the storm finish its work. It would have been the smart choice, the safe choice. But safety has never been the kind of story worth telling. The cry was coming from somewhere beyond the tree line, down where the wind dragged long threads of snow through the black spruces. Lena took her gloves off long enough to work the ice from her rifle's action, then pulled them back on, snugging the leather ties at her wrists. She left the axe where it stood, slung the Winchester over her shoulder, and started toward the sound. The snow was knee-deep in places, crusted with ice sharp enough to cut through wool. Each step was work, but she knew the lay of the land, the hidden dips where drifts swallowed men whole, the thin ice where the river curved under the hill. Her boots made almost no sound on the frozen ground, but her breath came in slow, white puffs that caught the faint glow of the lowering sun. The trees closed around her, their limbs bending under the weight of weeks' worth of snow. Somewhere ahead, there was a shape on the ground, dark against the white. Lena's grip tightened on the rifle as she approached. It was a man. He was face down, his coat half buried in snow, his hat gone. The left side of his parka was crusted dark, and even before she saw the blood, Lena could smell it, that sharp, metallic tang that cut through cold air. An ugly tear in the fabric at his shoulder told the rest. Bullet wound, close range. She knelt, brushing snow from his face. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s. Dark hair matted with frost and blood, a week's worth of beard shadowing his jaw. His lips were cracked, his skin pale beneath the windburn. When his eyes opened, they were the blue of deep river ice, alert despite the pain. "Don't," his voice was a hoarse rasp, steam curling from each word. "Don't stay here, they're coming back." Lena scanned the woods. Quiet now, but she knew what he meant. Tracks, half a dozen at least, led away from the hollow where he'd fallen. They were fresh, not more than an hour old. Whoever had done this might already be circling. She should leave him. He wasn't her fight. But as she met his gaze, she saw something in it. The kind of steady defiance she'd only ever seen in people who had more to lose than their own skin. "What's your name?" she asked. "Ward," he said, swallowing hard. "Elias Ward, federal investigator." His hand moved weakly toward the inside of his coat, then faltered. Lena found it herself, a leather packet bound tight with rawhide. Inside was a badge, tarnished but real, and a folded map marked with notes in a precise, careful hand. She closed it and tucked it back into his coat. "You got a place to hide?" she asked. He shook his head once, slow. "Only proof. They can't get it." Lena looked at the snow settling into his hair, the tremor in his voice, the growing red stain at his shoulder. She thought about the long, quiet winters she'd fought to build here, how much it would cost to keep them. And then she bent, got her arms under his, and hauled him up as gently as she could. "Then we'd better get you inside," she said, "before the storm and your friends both catch up." Snow came harder now, driving in slanted sheets that hissed against Lena's hood and stung any bare skin. She moved steady, forcing her way uphill toward the clearing where Carter's Rest stood, Elias slung awkwardly over her shoulder. He wasn't heavy for a man his size, but the dead weight of someone fighting to stay conscious was different, unpredictable. He muttered once or twice, words lost in the wind, but Lena caught fragments. "Documents, Crane, burn it." Then his head lolled forward, and he was silent again. The first orange light of the cabin windows felt like finding a fire in the middle of nowhere. Lena pushed through the last wall of spruce and crossed the yard, boots crunching on the crusted snow. She kicked the door shut behind them, the warmth from the wood stove hitting her in the face like a tide. She lowered Elias into the chair nearest the fire, then knelt to unbutton his coat. The wound was ugly, a clean shot through the muscle of his left shoulder, bleeding slow but steady. The fabric around it was frozen stiff. "This'll hurt," she said, not waiting for him to answer before cutting away the coat and shirt. The bullet was still in there, lodged near the back. She set water to boil on the stove, laid out her tools: the hunting knife, a pair of tongs she kept for firewood, a flask of whiskey, strips of clean cloth. Elias watched her with half-lidded eyes, his jaw tight. You do this often?" "Not often enough to like it," Lena said, pouring whiskey over the knife blade and wiping it with a scrap of linen. "Bite down on this." She handed him a folded leather strap. It took nearly 20 minutes, working with the slow precision her father had drilled into her when they lived on the edge of another wilderness. The bullet came free with a wet sound, dropping into the tin basin with a dull clink. She flushed the wound, packed it with boiled cloth, and bound it tight with strips of torn sheet. When she stepped back, sweat cooled on her neck despite the heat of the stove. Elias was breathing shallow but steady now, the strap still clenched in his teeth. "That'll hold," she said, sitting back on her heels. "If infection doesn't set in, you'll keep the arm." He spat the strap into his lap. "I've had worse." His voice was raw, but there was no bravado in it, just fact. They sat in silence a moment, the fire snapping in the grate. Outside, the wind had shifted, carrying with it a sound Lena didn't like, a faint, distant whinny of horses. Her head came up fast. "You ride here alone?" Elias's eyes sharpened. "No." She crossed to the window, easing the shutter open just enough to see. Snow and shadows blurred the tree line, but there was movement out there, shapes on horseback, slow and deliberate, angling to keep their distance. "They're here," she said. Elias reached weakly for his coat. "You have to leave me." "That's not happening." Lena dropped the bar across the front door and crossed to the gun rack. She took down her Winchester, checked the chamber, then set it by the window. The shotgun came next, leaned against the wall by the door. "Who are they?" His gaze was steady now, almost too steady. "Silas Crane. Hired gun for one of the big mining outfits. He cleans up problems. And you're a problem, Lena said flatly. I've got evidence. Bribes, murder contracts, names that reach all the way to the governor's office. If Crane gets it back, every honest man in the territory's as good as dead. The horses outside shifted, a snort breaking the stillness. Then a voice cut across the snow, smooth, deep, with the edge of a blade under the words. Elias Ward, it called. You in there, son? A pause. Why don't you save yourself some pain and come on out? We can make this quick. Elias's jaw tightened. Lena watched his face, saw the history there. Fear, anger, maybe guilt. The voice came again, almost pleasant now. Or maybe you'd like me to talk to the lady. I hear Carter's Rest is run by a woman. Be a shame if her fine little store burned to the ground. Lena didn't answer. She just reached for the shotgun and took her place by the door. The fire popped, loud in the silence that followed. Outside, the horses shifted again, and the voice laughed, low, certain. Lena's breath was steady. If Crane thought she'd hand over a half-dead man to save herself, he was about to learn something new about the woman at Carter's Rest. Snow swirled thick between the cabin and the tree line, the fading light turning it all to shades of blue and gray. Lena didn't move from the door. The shotgun felt natural in her hands, not as a threat, but as an extension of her own will, the same way she'd held it when wolves circled her smokehouse last winter. Outside, hooves crunched over hard-packed snow. A shadow detached from the tree line, broad-shouldered, riding a tall, dark bay. The man sat his saddle with the loose confidence of someone who'd spent more of his life on horseback than on solid ground. Silas Crane. Even through the veil of snow, Lena saw the details that matched Elias's warning. The heavy coat of dark hide, the brim of his hat pulled low, a gloved hand resting near the butt of a revolver that was more polished than the rest of him. When the wind eased, she caught the pale gleam of his eyes, sharp, assessing, and completely without mercy. "Evening, miss," he called, voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "I'll be plain. You've got something in there that belongs to my employer. A man, papers. I don't much care which you give me first, but I'll be taking both before I leave." Lena kept her back against the wall, just enough to the side of the door that a shot wouldn't find her by luck. "Not sure what you've heard," she said evenly, "but there's nobody here who belongs to you." Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "See, now that's where we disagree. I've been following Ward's trail since he left Fairbanks. Man's got a knack for surviving things other folks wouldn't. Shame if it runs out here." Behind her, Elias stirred in the chair. "Don't engage him," he murmured, voice low and rough. "He'll draw you into talking while his men take position." "Already have," Lena replied under her breath. Through the crack in the shutter, she counted movement in the snow, faint shapes fanning out left and right, keeping low, rifles slung under their coats. At least 4 of them. They weren't rushing. That told her everything about Crane's style. Patient, methodical, no wasted effort. "You've got 5 minutes to decide," Crane went on. "Hand him over, we all ride away with our skins intact. Keep him, and, well, you'll see." Lena leaned just far enough to let her voice carry. "You might as well use the 5 minutes to get your men out of my range. If I see one of 'em inside the fence line, I'll assume he's here to kill me, and I'll act accordingly." For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the hiss of wind. Then Crane chuckled, a deep, almost genuine sound. "They said you were stubborn, didn't say you were armed." "They should 'a' said both," Lena answered. Silas tipped his hat a fraction, the kind of gesture that might have been respect in another man. Then he wheeled his horse back toward the tree line, giving a low whistle. His men melted into the snow after him, their shapes swallowed by the storm. Elias let out a slow breath. "They're not gone, just getting ready." "I know," Lena said, lowering the shotgun. She crossed to the window again, watching for movement. The storm was coming in heavier now, masking sound and sight both. "They'll wait for the right moment, and they think I'll waste the time wondering when." Elias' head lifted. "What will you do instead?" "Use it," she said simply. She stoked the fire higher, pulled a lantern from the shelf, and began setting it low near the east wall where she knew a line of fire would be poor for anyone outside. In the kitchen, she moved the heavy oak table across the floor with a grunt, setting it sideways under the front window. Her rifle went on top, with a box of cartridges within reach. Elias watched her work with the faintest shadow of a smile. "You've done this before." "Not like this," Lena said, checking the load in her Colt before setting it on the table. "But trouble's trouble. Doesn't matter if it has 2 legs or 4. By full dark, the wind had risen to a constant low roar, shaking the shutters. The snow's reflection turned the windows into dim mirrors, and beyond them the world might as well have been the moon. Lena sat at the table, the rifle across her lap. Elias dozed in the chair by the fire, his breath shallow but even. The quiet between them was the kind only 2 people in real danger could share, each aware the next sound might be the last before action. Somewhere outside, a horse snorted. Then came the crunch of boots in snow. They were testing her perimeter now. Lena eased the rifle up, sights lined on the dark gap of the window. She didn't fire, not yet. Instead, she waited, letting them know she'd seen them without showing exactly where she was. When the shape retreated, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "They'll come at night," Elias said quietly. "Then they'll find out what kind of night it is," Lena answered. She didn't know yet if she could hold Carter's Rest against Silas Crane and his men. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't about to hand them what they'd come for. Not the man, not the papers, and not the satisfaction of seeing her back down. The second set of boot crunches didn't retreat. Lena moved to the side window, saw a figure crouching low against the snowbank, rifle in hand. No hesitation, she raised her Winchester, squeezed the trigger. The crack split the night, the muzzle flash bright against the storm. The figure dropped, rolling back into the shadows. Another shadow darted from the opposite side, too fast to aim. The shotgun roared from the doorway, scattering snow and forcing the man back into cover. "That's their test," Elias said, bracing himself against the wall, revolver in hand despite his wound. "They failed," Lena replied. A third man tried to use the distraction to reach the porch. She fired again, the shot sparking off the post inches from his head. He tumbled backward, swearing. Silence followed, broken only by the wind. Then Crane's voice rolled in from the tree line, calm as ever. "All right, Miss Carter, you've got some fight. That's fine. We'll wait. See how much fight you've got left when the night's over." Snow swallowed his words as the hoofbeats faded. But Lena knew they hadn't gone far, just far enough to make her wonder when they'd return. She closed the shutters, checked each weapon, and met Elias's gaze. "They know we won't fold. That means the next time they'll come to finish it." Elias nodded once. "Then we'd better make it cost them." Outside, the wind howled harder. Inside, Lena Carter settled in for the siege. The storm eased sometime after midnight, leaving a brittle cold that made the cabin timbers creak. Lena had slept in shifts before, but tonight there would be none. She sat by the front window, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the pale wash of snow under a half moon. Crane's men had set their camp in the lee of the spruce grove. She couldn't see the fire from here, but she caught the flicker of it now and then when the wind shifted. Smart. Keep it low. Let the cold do its work on the defenders. Elias lay on the cot near the stove, his coat thrown over him, face turned toward the door. Even half-conscious, his hand rested on the grip of his revolver. "You ever faced a siege before?" Lena asked quietly. His eyes opened to slits. "Once, Mexico border, 07. We were 6 against 30. They tried starving us out." "How'd it end?"
"We broke through on day 3. His gaze sharpened. "This one won't last that long if we don't make a move. They've got numbers, supplies. You've got, what, a few days of food and a root cellar?" "And my home," Lena said. "I've held on to it against worse odds than a handful of hired guns." Elias didn't argue. He just watched her reload the Winchester with smooth, practiced motions. By dawn, the sound of work drifted from the tree line. Muted thuds, the metallic clank of something heavy. Through the narrow slit in the shutter, Lena spotted 2 men dragging timbers, another carrying a coil of rope. They weren't building a fire this time. "They're making ladders," she muttered. Elias pushed himself up on one elbow. "Means they're planning a rush, multiple points. They'll test our flanks first, try to find the weak spot." A sharp whistle cut across the snow, followed by Crane's voice, as steady and sure as if he were talking from across a saloon table. "Miss Carter, Mr. Ward, you awake in there?" Lena didn't answer. "I like to give folks a chance," Crane went on. "Chance to think, to weigh their options. You've had the night for that. But if you're still wondering whether it's worth it, it ain't. That man's not worth your life, Miss Carter." Elias shifted uncomfortably. Lena kept her voice low. "He's trying to make it about me." "It is about you now," Elias said. She ignored that and raised her voice just enough to carry. "You come any closer, Crane, and I'll make sure you're the first to drop." Silas chuckled. "Lady like you could have made a fine living anywhere. You choose to rot out here? Don't make sense. You could walk away right now. I'll even let you take your horse." "I'm home," she said, "and you're not welcome." Silence for a beat. Then the sound of boots crunching over snow as Crane retreated. But Lena knew better. He wasn't giving up. He was adjusting the noose. By midday, the first arrow came. Not to kill, just to test. It thudded into the outer wall above the store counter, quivering for a moment before going still. The second struck the shutters by the east window. Lena stayed low, tracking movement between the trees.
"2 on the left, 1 circling right." Elias coughed. "They're probing, mapping your firing lines." The next arrow carried a strip of cloth tied to the shaft, bright red against the snow. Lena yanked it free, found nothing, just a warning. The 4th arrow didn't come at all. Instead, a man's voice, younger than Crane's, shouted from the tree line. "You know what happens to folks who hide federal men out here. Happened up at Dawson Crossing last year. They burned the house, shot the owner's dogs, strung him up to make a point." Elias swore under his breath. "They're trying to rattle you." "They'll need more than that," Lena said, but her jaw was tight. That night, the real game began. It started with noises, a horse screaming in the dark, then nothing. Footsteps crunching in the snow where there shouldn't be any. A single knock on the back door, soft as a neighbor might give. Elias had the sense to stay inside of the front door, pistol ready. Lena took the back, watching the shadows between the smokehouse and the barn. Twice she thought she saw movement, but each time it melted away before she could aim. By morning, fatigue was setting in. She boiled coffee strong enough to strip paint, poured a cup for Elias, and took one herself. "They're waiting for us to slip," she said. "Or they're giving Crane time to get creative," Elias answered. He wasn't wrong. Near noon, a rider approached under a white scrap tied to a stick. He came slow, hands visible, a bundle slung across his saddle. Lena sighted him through the rifle slit. One man, staying cautious. Crane's voice carried from behind the rider. "Got something for you, Miss Carter. Thought you might like to see it." The rider stopped just beyond easy range, dropped the bundle in the snow, and wheeled back to the trees. Lena waited until he was gone before stepping out to fetch it. Elias covered her from the doorway. Inside, she unwrapped oilskin to find a wool coat, torn and stiff with blood. In one pocket, a badge, dented and dark. Elias's face hardened. "Hayes, my partner." "They're trying to make me think this is my future," Lena said quietly. "What do you think?" Elias asked.
"I think they shouldn't have reminded me why I'm not giving up," she said, eyes flat as winter ice. The next night, the siege shifted. Lena heard the low murmur of voices through the wall. Crane, close enough now that she could make out his words. "You ever think about how this ends, Ward? You bleed out in there while she freezes beside you? Or maybe they'll find you both after the thaw, picked clean by wolves." Elias said nothing, but Lena saw his hand tighten on the revolver. "You can end it now," Crane continued. "You step out, hand me the papers, I give her safe passage. She never has to see your face again." Lena leaned to the window and called back, "If you're done talking, Crane, we've got a stove to feed." The pause before his answer was long enough to tell her she'd hit something. "Suit yourself," he said at last. "We'll come for you when the fire dies down." That was the moment Lena knew the fight was moving toward its endgame. The cold, the isolation, the constant pressure. Crane was counting on them to break. But the same winter that worked against her would sap his men too. She checked the ammunition. 24 rifle rounds, half a box for the shotgun, 6 for the Colt. Enough to make them pay for every foot they tried to take. "Whatever happens," she told Elias, "we make it hurt." He gave a grim nod. "Until the last round." The first shot came just before dawn. A single crack split the cold air, the bullet punching through the east shutter and splintering the far wall. Lena was already up, moving to the window before the echo died. Shapes emerged from the tree line, dark against the pale snow. 3 on the left, 2 on the right, rifles up, moving low and fast. Behind them, the faint outline of a ladder slung between 2 men. "They're coming," Lena said, voice steady. Elias pushed himself to his feet, grimacing at the pull in his shoulder. He checked the load on his revolver, then took position by the back window. "We hold them here, make them regret the first step." The second shot came from the right, glass shattering in the store window. Lena answered with the Winchester, the report booming inside the cabin. One of Crane's men pitched forward into the snow, unmoving. The others didn't stop. From the rear came the sound of boots on frozen wood. Someone had reached the porch. Elias fired twice through the wall at the sound, and a muffled curse told him he'd hit something. Then the ladder came up against the east wall. A man climbed fast, head down, his partner at the base covering him with rifle fire. Lena shifted, took a breath, and squeezed the trigger. The climber's body went limp, sliding down in a heap. The man below turned to run, but Elias caught him with a clean shot through the side window. The assault faltered. Crane's voice cut through the wind. "Fall back!" And just like that, the snowfield emptied. The only movement was the steam rising from bodies cooling in the frost. They had minutes at most before the next push. Lena used them to drag the wounded man from the porch into the snow line. He was bleeding from a gut shot, breath shallow, but still alive. "You're not going to make it," she told him plainly. He looked at her through the haze of pain. "Better than what Crane'll do if I go back empty-handed." Lena studied his face a moment, then stripped the spare cartridges from his belt and left him where he lay. The cold would finish what her bullet had started. When the second wave came, it was from both sides at once. Gunfire rattled the shutters and chewed into the log walls. Splinters flew. Elias returned fire in measured, precise shots, forcing the attackers to keep their heads down. Lena worked the shotgun now, blasting at any shadow that broke from cover. A shout from the rear. 2 men had reached the smokehouse, using it as staging to get closer to the cabin. Lena ducked low, reloaded, and fired through the back window, hitting one square in the chest. The other bolted for the trees. Crane called off the attack again after only a few minutes. This time he didn't retreat far. By midday, the air smelled of gunpowder and sap from the wounded trees. Elias slumped back against the wall, breathing hard. "They're testing us, seeing how long we can keep the pace."
"We'll keep it until we run dry," Lena said. She checked the ammunition again, down to a dozen rifle rounds, half a dozen shells, 4 Colt cartridges. Enough for one more serious push. "You know," Elias said, "if we took the fight to them—" "Then we'd be dead," she cut in. "We stay here, let them waste themselves." The final push of the day came as the light began to fail. Crane's men moved in tighter formation this time, 2 with torches, the rest laying down heavy fire to cover them. The first torch landed short, hissing in the snow. The second hit the porch railing, flame licking at the wood. Lena dropped the torchbearer with the Winchester, then swung to cover Elias as he snuffed the fire with a bucket of melted snow. "Too close," he said, wiping ice from his gloves. The attackers pulled back once more, leaving only the groan of the wind and the stillness of the snow. As night fell, Lena and Elias sat by the fire, weapons close, eyes on the door. "They'll change tactics," Elias said. "Next time it won't be a rush." "I know," Lena replied. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, the sound carrying across the frozen clearing. It might have been nature reminding them of the land's own dangers, or it might have been Crane letting them know he was still out there, waiting for the right moment to finish what he'd started. Either way, the siege wasn't over. The next morning broke under a flat gray sky, the kind of cold that made breath freeze before it left your lips. The storm had passed, leaving a stillness Lena didn't trust. She stood at the front window, scanning the tree line. No movement, no voices, no sound but the creak of ice in the branches. "They're not gone," Elias said from the table, nursing a tin mug of coffee. His color was better this morning, but his left arm stayed close to his side. "They're planning something," Lena answered. The first sign came an hour later, 2 figures dragging a sled out of the woods. At first she thought it was firewood. Then she saw the barrels lashed to it. "Kerosene," Elias muttered. Lena felt her jaw tighten. "They'll try to burn us out." She moved fast, hauling the water barrels inside, checking the roof tin she'd nailed down after a lightning strike last year. The cabin's thick log walls would resist fire for a while, but not forever. When the attack came, it started from the west. 2 men lobbed bottles flaming at the neck, the glass shattering against the snowbank beside the porch. The flames hissed out before they could spread. The third bottle hit the south wall, splashing burning oil. Lena grabbed the bucket, doused it, and was already back in position before the smoke cleared. From the east, rifle fire cracked. Elias fired back, dropping one of the shooters before the others faded into the trees. Then Crane's voice carried, low but clear. "Every man's got a breaking point, Miss Carter. Yours is coming."
I could finish this in 5 minutes, but where's the fun in that? Lena didn't answer. She knew talking only fed his game. That night, they tried something new. A single horse rode in slow from the north. A man slumped over the saddle horn. No gun in his hand. No sound but the creak of leather and the animal's snort. "Trap," Elias said immediately. "Of course it is," Lena agreed, but she kept her rifle up anyway. When the horse came within 30 yards, the rider slid sideways into the snow. For a heartbeat, there was no movement. Then 3 men burst from the trees to the west, rifles firing. Lena's first shot dropped one. Elias's second took another in the leg. The third ran back for cover without reaching the cabin. The injured rider scrambled up and sprinted after them, very much alive. Elias gave a short, humorous laugh. "Guess they thought we were green." "They'll learn," Lena said. By the 3rd day of siege, supplies were running thin. The coffee tin was nearly empty, the bread gone, and the jerky down to a few strips. Ammunition was worse: 9 rifle rounds, 4 shotgun shells, 3 for the Colt. Elias looked at the remaining cartridges laid out on the table. "One more real fight, that's it." Lena nodded. "Then we make it the last one they ever start." Crane didn't wait long to force it. That evening, as the shadows stretched long across the snow, 6 figures stepped from the trees in a loose half-circle.
Silas Crane was at the center, his coat open, hands bare despite the cold. He called out like a man ordering supper. "Last chance, folks. Hand over Ward and the papers, and I swear you'll walk away." Lena raised her rifle to the window slit. "You've had your chance to leave, Crane. You stayed. Now you pay." Crane's grin was all teeth. "So be it." The men spread, firing in bursts, keeping her head down, while 2 of them rushed the porch. Elias fired from the side window, hitting one, but the second reached the door. Lena was there to meet him with the shotgun, the blast throwing him backward into the snow. More shots from the tree line. A bullet punched through the wall inches from Elias's head. "To left flank," he shouted. Lena swung to cover, her rifle cracking twice in quick succession. 1 man dropped. The other kept coming. Crane himself moved in then, low and fast, revolver in hand. She fired, the shot grazing his sleeve, but he dove behind the woodpile. The fight surged and broke in minutes. 4 of Crane's men lay still in the snow, 2 more limping back to the trees. Only Crane stayed, crouched behind the pile, reloading slow, deliberate. "You've done well," he called, "better than most. But I've still got 1 more card." Lena felt the hair rise on her neck. "Elias, watch the back." The crash of glass from the rear window cut her off. 2 men burst through the back, one with a pistol, the other swinging a length of chain. Elias shot the first, but the second was on him before he could aim again. They went down hard, the pistol skidding across the floor. Lena swung the Colt from her hip, firing once. The chain wielder collapsed over Elias, dead before he hit the boards. When she looked back to the front, Crane was gone. Night fell on silence. 6 bodies lay cooling in the clearing. The snow was churned dark with blood. Elias sat at the table, rebandaging his shoulder. "He's not done. Men like Crane don't quit until they're cold." "Then, tomorrow," Lena said, "we finish it." The gray light of dawn pressed through the broken shutters, painting the cabin in cold tones. Smoke from the stove curled lazily in the air, carrying the faint scent of last night's coffee. Lena sat at the table, rifle across her knees, counting the last of their ammunition. 6 rifle rounds, 2 shotgun shells, 1 cartridge for the Colt. That was all. Elias watched her from the cot, his wounded arm wrapped tight.
We can't take another day like yesterday. Sooner or later, they'll find a gap." She nodded slowly. "Which is why we hit first." He frowned. "That's not been your way." "It is now. Crane's down to a handful of men. He's tired, cold, and running out of food, same as us. If we end him before he can regroup or get more guns, Carter's Rest survives. If we wait, we won't." Elias considered her words, then pushed himself up. "Then we make it clean, no dragging it out." They slipped out through the back, moving wide through the snow-packed trees. The cold bit at their faces, the air so still that every creak of leather felt loud. When they reached the ridge above the grove, they saw what was left of Crane's camp. The fires were low, sheltered under spruce boughs. 3 men moved around slowly, tending to gear. Crane stood apart, studying a map on a crate. "He's light on guards," Elias whispered. "He thinks we're still hiding in the cabin." They moved into position, Lena circling left through the trees while Elias crept down the slope to draw Crane's attention. His plan was simple: step into view, bait Crane into exposing himself, and give Lena the angle for a clean shot. At 30 yards, Elias called out, "Crane!" The outlaw's head snapped up, his pale eyes narrowed. "Well, look at you. Couldn't wait for me to knock again?" "You're finished," Elias said. Crane's grin was thin. "You've been saying that for days." He moved toward Elias, revolver low at his side. That was his mistake, turning just enough for Lena to see the open line through the trees. She drew a steady breath, sights settling on him. The Winchester cracked. Crane staggered but didn't fall. His gun came up fast, firing at Elias, the shot grazing his coat. Elias dove for cover as Lena fired again, the second bullet catching Crane in the side.
One of his men rushed forward. Elias put him down with a single sharp shot. The others froze, unsure whether to run or fight. Crane, bleeding now, tried to close the distance on Elias. "You think you've won?" he rasped. "I've got friends in every town from here to Dawson." "Not anymore," Elias said. Before Crane could lift his revolver again, Lena stepped from the trees behind him. "Drop it." For a moment she thought he might, but then his hand twitched toward the trigger. The last cartridge from her Colt ended it. Silence fell heavy in the grove, broken only by the hiss of the dying campfires. The 2 remaining gunmen dropped their weapons and bolted into the trees. Neither Lena nor Elias bothered to chase them. They stood over Crane's body for a long moment. Snow began to fall again, thin flakes catching in his open eyes. "That's it," Elias said quietly. "Until the next one," Lena replied. They hauled Crane's body and the evidence from the camp back to Carter's Rest. 2 days later, a column of federal marshals arrived, summoned by a message Elias had hidden in a false-bottom satchel before the siege began. The lead marshal listened to their account, then looked at Lena. "You've done this territory a service. That man's been poisoned for years." "I didn't do it for the territory," she said. "I did it because it was right." When the marshals rode out with Crane's body and the evidence, Elias stayed. His wounds were healing, but the look in his eyes was sharp, purposeful. "You ever think about taking this fight beyond your land?" he asked. "We could use someone like you, someone who knows how to stand when others run." Lena glanced at the bullet-pocked walls, the snow-covered clearing. "I've been fighting for this place for years. Maybe it's time to fight for more." Elias smiled. "Then ride with me. We'll keep the law alive where no one else will." Weeks later, as spring softened the snow, Lena saddled her horse. Carter's Rest stood behind her, repaired but not untouched, its scars a reminder of what it had survived. Elias waited at the edge of the trail. "Ready?"
She took one last look back. Let's see what else needs fixing.
They rode into the open white, two figures against the vast northern horizon, proof that justice could still find its way, even at the farthest edge of the map.